Hello, welcome to my side of the mountain. I'm Chris of Chrissy's Over the Mountain Crochet and Crafts, and I want to show you how to make the easiest baby quilt ever. You will need a yard of fleece and a yard of quality flannel. This uses a stitch and turn method. You'll need, of course, scissors, sewing machine, sewing needles, ballpoint needle is recommended, thread, and quality flannel. Snuggle from Joann's doesn't do the job as well as a quality flannel. That's why I'm using something from my stash. We need to use up our stash. I will show you how to do minimal quilting to make this truly a little baby quilt. I'm going to work with the strawberry shortcake design to start with. It's had it for a while. I'm going to trim off these edges. I will trim off the selvage edges on this fabric, and then I will square it up, and then I will lay it along this piece of fleece. Now, this piece of fleece is way too large for that flannel fabric, but I want to tell you something on how to tell what is the right side and the wrong side of your fleece. The right side and the wrong side. This is the right side because the selvage is still attached and the selvage does not stretch, but it rolls to the right side. Now, if you happen to have a piece of fleece that has the selvage cut off, then you stretch it on the cross grain. This is the cross grain. This is across the bottom or the top where the cut is, and then you stretch it and it will fold to the wrong side of the fabric. So selvage will fold and curl to the right side, and if you stretch it on the cross grain, it folds to the wrong side. Now, it's up to you which side you want to use as the right side. Generally, the right side will wash better and present better after a lot of use. But you can see this is the wrong side. The pattern isn't as defined. All right, so let's work with this piece. So I'm going to open this up and I'm going to use my scissors to cut off the selvage edge. I'm just going to follow the line that is in the print of this fabric. This is the type of project that anyone can make. This is very beginner friendly. Let me trim off these scragglies. I don't like the scragglies. Just let me trim it off. Now this is not a squared up piece of fabric. I'll show you how to square this in just a moment. I highly suggest if you're working with flannel that you run it through the washer. And I don't suggest washing it on a heavy duty cycle, but definitely wash and dry your flannel as it will shrink. The easiest way to square this up is fold it in half. And make sure the selvage edges are as even as possible. Does not have to be perfect, but you want a good fold. When you get to this fold, there shouldn't be any ripples. If you can't get ripples out of this fold, like if there's a if there's a weird ripple, you need to adjust over on this side. Okay, so there was a little bit of a weird ripple right here, so I just pushed it to this side. And as you can see, that means these edges don't match. And that is totally okay. I'm going to fix that. That is not that big of an issue. All right, let me check this right here. Okay, we're looking good. All right, I want to show you what it looks like on this side. So it's even up until here. So anytime you buy yardage, it is not square. Now I'm wanting to square the ends at this point. So I'm bringing my edges, making sure there aren't any ripples in my fold. underneath. You have to push those ripples out. Okay, now I have a very straight edge right here. Remember, this isn't as straight because the selvage edge isn't as straight. So I'm going to place this. I'm going to ignore this for right now. I'm going to find a line. Let me see. I feel like I have a ripple. If you have a ripple where you cut, it will create a rough edge right here, and you don't want that. I'm going to use my rotary cutter and a clear ruler. I really, really like a clear ruler. I also want to show you that these edges do not even begin to match when I have folded that in half. So this is why I need to square up the edges. All right, I'm going to feel where the last edge is, and I'm going to make sure it is on this line. I'm going to make sure the edge of the blanket right here is on this line, and I will cut on this line using my rotary cutter. This is a good technique to use with knit fabric. And flannel is so easy and fast to work with. You can just handle it. You can put it in its place and it's not going to shift. It's not like chiffon. All right, I flipped it over. I'm going to place my folded edge. This is the selvage edge. I'm placing my folded edge along this line. Doesn't matter what line it is on. It just needs to follow a line. Now I'm going to look at these edges. These are pretty clean, actually. I won't have to take much off of this. You can see there's just like 1/4 of an inch. I had to take probably 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch on this end. So I'm going to use this line right here, and I'm going to shove this down because I don't want to take off any more than I have to. All right. Now I'm going to place my ruler following this line to the opposite line. There we go. And use my, I don't think I need to take that much off. Let me move this down some more. This is such beautiful fabric. I don't want to waste any of it. All right, there we go. Probably didn't make any difference, but I feel better making sure I didn't. I'm not going to waste my beautiful fabric. All right, the ends are square. All right, so now how to get an even selvage edge. Basically the same way. Now you know you've got straight edges on this side. So now you just have to work to get a good fold here. Make sure there's not a ripple there. Now, if I have a longer, you really have to make sure that these two edges match, and you're going to place them on a line. So let's straighten all of this out. And it's becoming very square because it lays on this line and then it lays on this line. But as you can see, this is off. So I don't want to take much of this fabric at all. I'm going to actually fold it one more time because my ruler is short. Now I do have a longer ruler, but I want to show you how to do this if you have a shorter ruler also. So we know this is square, so we bring this fold up and make sure. I use this technique with knit fabric all the time. It is so much easier to work with your fabric and to cut out a pattern on your knit fabric if it is square. I'm not so much worried about all of the ripples here. I just want this to be smooth and even. And it is. All right. Let me check the inside. All right, we are in good shape. Now I'll probably be taking off a 1/4 of an inch on this end. Remember, what I'm trimming is the selvage edge that was very uneven. Well, not very uneven. I've had fabric pieces that were much more uneven than this. All right. There we go. And now we have a perfectly square yard of fabric. We're putting away the rotary cutter, and we're putting away the ruler. All we need to do now is place this on the fleece. It's not going to, I'm going to have a good bit of leftover fleece. I can open this out and lay it on the floor, or I can place this on the fold. This was a purchased yard of fleece. I'm going to lay it on the fold and just use my scissors and cut around it. Now, if your flannel happens to be bigger than your fleece, then of course you can cut inches off the length or the width of the flannel using that rotary cutter technique that I showed you. Really simple. Just keep everything folded as well as you can. There we go. I can use my rotary cutter, but I'm going to use my scissors. I'm a scissors gal. I have been cutting out patterns for so many years before rotary cutters were big. But you are welcome to use your rotary cutter. This does not have to be a pristine finished edge. I did want my flannel to be square. And I have a little piece of leftover fabric that I can do something with. Or I can trash it. But it would make a cute little baby hat. All right, so I'm going to place right sides together. This is the right side. I showed you how to check for the right side. And I'm going to see how well there is a match. With fleece, there is so much bulk that when I cut it on the fold, there may be a little bit of extra fabric. So let's see how this matches up. All right, I'm going to pin this corner. And I'm going to pin this edge, just some quick pins. And I can see I have a little bit, this would account for the bulk on the fold. My corner fits right there. I just have a little bit right here and a little bit right here, but everything else seems to be square. There is no need for an inner lining unless you would want one. But since we're sewing this together on the sewing machine, I don't want fleece. And I have actually made this for babies. And the moms just love this little quilt. I will be sewing with a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way around. I'll leave an opening right here. I'm going to leave a very generous opening. And then we will turn it and I'll show you what's next. So this is kind of fragile. So I'm going to kind of roll it together. I need to set this aside so I can set my sewing machine up. So I'm going to roll it. And then when I take it to the sewing machine, I'm going to make sure I support everything so that nothing stretches out, because we are putting flannel and knit together. And if you aren't gentle with the knit, it can stretch out and get a little on the diagonal or the bias, and then you might have a ripple that you don't want once you start doing that minimal amount of quilting that we will do. We will just do the barest minimum of quilting on this blanket. Okay, now I'm going to start right where I want the opening so that I know when I get back around to this pin that is going this way, I know to stop. So I don't have to start right at the pin. I'm going to start right about here. And I'm using a little bit longer stitch length since I'm putting two different types of fabric together. So I'll take a few stitches. Not quite a top stitch, but underneath a top stitch as far as stitch length goes. And I'll show you what technique I use when I get to the corners. When I get to the corner, I'm just going to sew right off the edge. Pick up my needle. Try to put everything in my lap, but leave it bunched up so that it is supported and it's not stretching out. Now I will start off right at the edge of the corner and I'll stitch. And when I come this direction, I'll be stitching through this line of stitching, and it'll make a very crisp corner. Even though this corner doesn't need to be crisp, it's a technique I like to use. Now back stitch. Stitching off the edge, picking up my presser foot, pulling the threads just a little bit, turning it around, and I'm using the flannel as a guide. Remember, I had a little bit of extra on this edge. I am going to follow this line, not this line. I'll trim this off. After I'm finished sewing all of this, I will trim it to 1/4 of an inch. Now I need to trim. I'll clip each corner. You can see the little X right there. I'll clip each corner, and then I will trim 1/4 of an inch. When I get to the opening, I will leave the opening as is. I won't trim that opening. I want to have a piece of fabric that I can work with, and that way I know I can sufficiently tuck it inside. You'll see that technique as I get there. All the way around, clipping the corners. Okay, so we're at the corner. Let's get rid of this waste. And here is the opening. As you can see, I left that edge longer so that it is easier to turn in. So now let's just put our hand in, grab one corner, pull it out, kind of pinch that corner and pull it, grab it, just pull it through, and just start the pulling process. If the hole is big enough, it's the easiest pull through in the world. No sense in tugging and pulling. You're dealing with knit fabric, and if you have to tug and pull, you can just make everything look a little bit messy. Now, you're going to want to go through and poke all of your corners out. That's really cute. Really like that. My lint brush for my sewing machine, I'm going to use the pokey end. I'm going to use this end to push out the corners. I'm going to push it as far as I can with my finger. Let me check this corner. I think this corner looks pretty good. I might want to push that out a little bit. Just a tiny bit. I'm just barely pushing. This is such a forgiving piece of fabric. Let's close this hole and start pinning. So this is the opening right here. And I just fold it down, make sure it's nice and neat, and pin it. And when you're finished, you won't even know that this opening was even here, because we will put a top stitch all the way around the edge. Now you can get a little bit happy and push too much fabric down in there. I have done that, but I'm constantly looking to make sure that I have an even crease right here, that it's not bowed down in the center or bowed up. Just take your time and pin it closed. There we go. That opening is pinned. Now all the way around the edge of the quilt, you're going to want to take your fingers. See, this looks rather messy, but you're going to want to take your fingers and roll it together so that you have a nice clean edge, and you can feel that seam allowance in there, and you're going to put a pin just right under that seam allowance, and the top stitching you do will be right on that seam allowance, and that creates a bit of stability to this edge also. And we'll use a longer top stitch. Now, take a little bit of time and care to pinch this out and roll it out, because if you don't, you'll have a little scoop in on either corner. All right, Let me finish this up and I'll come back and show you how to stitch this. It's very easy. You just start pushing with your thumb, then roll back with your fingers. Push with your thumb and roll back with your fingers, and then just give it a good roll and a finger press, and then stick your pin in place. Let's do that again. Roll with your thumbs, push with your fingers, just roll it back and forth, and you can feel that 1/4 inch seam that you have left in there. And then you can just pin it in place, and when you are top stitching, it will look very nice and neat. And that is how you roll your seam together. So I'm getting ready to sew the edge. I rolled the seams together. It's a remember, roll back and forth. I made sure my corners were as pokey as possible, but they didn't have a dip on the side. I'll be placing a top stitch just right along the edge seam. Let's get started. As I'm sewing this, I'm feeling with my finger, and I can tell that I am stitching on that little bit of seam, and that is exactly what I want. I'll come to the corner here and show you how to turn the corner. All right, I'm going to hold on to this corner, and I'm going to go rather slow, and I'm going to get right up to the edge. All right, leave the needle down, make a turn, and you're ready to go down the other side. Pretty easy. Can you see that corner? Let me take a few more stitches. Sometimes that fleece will want to roll to the front. Just roll it to the back. See that nice little corner? All right, let's finish this blanket. Look at this nice clean stitching. Isn't it beautiful? And it has a nice rolled edge. Everything is nice and neat. Sometimes when you're coming to a corner, it's hard to tell if you should lift your presser foot and turn. And this is one instance where I'm lifting it too soon, because when I put my presser foot down, it's too wide. I want the seam to go along that 1/4 inch line right there. So I'm going to take one more stitch and then pick up and turn. Just one. You can do that by turning the flywheel, or just by experience you can take one stitch. And now we're ready to continue. I'm coming up to the opening that I folded in. I want to show you how easy it is to just sew these together. Now you might want to keep in mind that sometimes these shift. So turn your fabric just a little bit to make sure they're meeting evenly. There we go. Because see, this is open, but you use your fingers to keep it together.
I forgot the chicken.
But you're using the same seam allowance. I do go a little slower right through here so that I can pay attention to how the seam is coming together. And we are past the open part, and I'm almost finished, and I'll show you what it looks like. Right here are my crossed pins, and right here is where I shoved the edges to the inside, pinned it, and sewed it in place. And you can barely tell that there was even an opening right through there, only because I know where it's at. Finishing it up. And we met. Now we're going to take a few back stitches. And we are finished. Now the edge is just a little rippled. You can leave it like that, but if you'd like a more finished look, just take a warm iron and give it a press. Not a hot iron, just a warm iron. It won't take much to just get rid of that ripple. So the blanket is all sewn. I have taken this to an ironing board and I have ironed it. Now I'm going to pat from the center out and even up any bubbles. I want bubbles to be away from the seam. With flannel and fleece together, it is so forgiving. They mesh and mold into each other. And I'm going to start safety pinning when I am happy with the smoothness of my quilt. And I'll start using a safety pin, and I'll start in the center. And then I'll go to each corner, and then across. This will help stabilize the fabric and keep it from shifting when I take it to the sewing machine to do a little bit of fussy bits of quilting on it with my sewing machine. I'm going to start pinning from here to here because there seems to be a little bit of a ripple here. I don't know if it's because it is off of the Olfa mat or not. I'm not sure, but it makes sense to get rid of the ripples by going this direction. All right, now we have this direction to go, and then we'll just randomly put pins in other areas. I'm going to do some machine quilting on this little quilt, but I'm not going to close up or make a complete square. I might just come through and make a line of stitching right along these strawberries and then across the bottom. So there's a pattern to my stitching, but I'm not bringing my stitching together that will create a ripple, because this is not a true quilt, but it's a quick, easy quilt or blanket to make if you need something for a baby shower, and it's really nice. Look how beautiful this is. So let me take this to the sewing machine and show you how I will just be making random stitches. You can use a pattern or you can just random it if you want, but I do not recommend making a square unless it's very small, or outlining unless it's very small. If you want to do that, you would have to hoop your blanket to keep everything stable, and even then you run the risk of, when you come back around to meet where you start, having a ripple, and that's not usually pleasing. So a random straight line here, random straight line here, straight line there, And I'll show you how to do that with the view of what I was referring to. You'll just make a straight line here, straight line here, straight line here, straight line here, wherever you feel that you want stitching. We're just going to make some stitches. So I'll be using a top stitch, and my first line of stitching is going to be right here beside Strawberry Shortcake. So I will put the presser. So I'll take a stitch or two forward and then a stitch or two back. Now you have to take a little bit of care to smooth as you're sewing. And then just clip those off. Okay, I have my line of stitching here. Now I think I'll make my next line of stitching right here. So I need to turn my quilt. Back stitch. Clip that off. And okay, so let's do this stitching randomly all throughout the quilt, or do a specific pattern, however you want to do that. There is no wrong way as far as doing the straight lines and using a pattern that you would like. I just don't recommend going in a circle or a complete square or outlining a character. All right, let me get to the end of this project and then I'll show you the finish. Find the stitching pattern that you are wanting to make on your quilt or on your baby blanket. It's easiest to manage this big bulky item at the sewing machine by rolling it into a roll. I still have to stitch straight down on a few of these Strawberry Shortcake rows. I missed these, so I'm going to show you how I roll it into a roll the blanket. Now the first one I'm going to stitch, I'll go ahead and remove that safety pin. The first one I'm going to stitch is right here, so I can just slide this whole portion under this on the sewing machine bed. And then this is rolled up underneath, and I can take my stitches down this little portion that I'm wanting to stitch. Now I just unroll it a little bit until I get to my next little Strawberry Shortcake. Just pull on that a little, drop my presser foot, and stitch down this line. I'll have threads to clip when I'm finished. But it will save you time if you roll it up and then you just move the fabric. There's no need to clip what is underneath. You can clip the top if you'd like. I like to clip the top because then I know I can push my thread to the back. Here's my other strawberry shortcake that needs a line of stitching. Like I said, this is random. It doesn't really matter. I'd say I have one more to make. Yeah, there I do. I have one more to make. Let me get that safety pin out of the way. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pull that off of the machine and then look at what is underneath. I'll clip what's on top. And then when it's flipped over, you can see all of the connector threads underneath. All right, let's take a look. All right, you can see the random stitching just in random areas, and it will hold the quilt together, and you have a beautiful quilt for baby. Just remove the safety pins and you are done. You have a nice edge, nice corners. The back has a little bit of texture from the stitching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. It was really good to have you on my side of the mountain. I hope you'll come again soon. Bye.